What if one narrow stretch of water could quietly hold the economic stability of half the planet in place, not by force, not by design, but simply by existing? Every single day, thousands of vessels move through a corridor so narrow it feels less like open ocean and more like a controlled hallway between two worlds. Oil from Arabian deserts moving toward Asian megacities, semiconductors destined for American living rooms, raw materials that will eventually become the cables, the screens, the packaging that furnishes modern life. All of it flowing through the same tight passage between the Malay Peninsula and the coast of Sumatra, the Strait of Malacca. If this corridor stopped functioning tomorrow, the consequences would not begin in Southeast Asia. They would begin everywhere simultaneously in the form of missing shipments, rising fuel prices, and the slow suffocation of supply chains the modern world has spent decades making leaner and faster. Because the modern world does not only depend on production, it depends on movement. And the most strategically important places on Earth are not always where things are made. They are where things must pass, which raises a quiet question hidden inside the geography of our planet. What happens when too much depends on one route, and why have engineers spent centuries dreaming of a way around it? To understand why Malacca matters, you have to stop thinking about geography as land, as borders drawn between nations, and begin thinking about it as flow, as the invisible architecture of movement that underlies everything we consume. The global economy is not a map of countries with flags and capitals. It is a map of currents, energy moving from the Persian Gulf toward the factories of China, Japan, and South Korea. Finished goods moving from Asian manufacturing hubs toward North American and European consumers. Agricultural commodities crossing climate zones to feed populations that could not otherwise feed themselves. And almost all of it obeys a single rule, ruthless in its simplicity. The shortest, safe route wins. The Strait of Malacca exists because the Earth itself created a near-perfect shortcut between two great ocean systems. A maritime bridge, roughly 800 kilometers long, connecting the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea and, beyond it, the Pacific. At its narrowest point near the city of Malacca on the Malaysian coast, it is less than 65 kilometers wide. Ships choose it, for the same reason water chooses the path of least resistance. Efficiency, cost reduction, time saved, fuel conserved. Each year, more than 90,000 vessels transit this corridor, carrying an estimated quarter of the world's traded goods and close to a quarter of all seaborne oil. Not because some international body declared it a preferred route, not because it was engineered to be optimal, but because the shape of the Earth made it the most logical path between two of the world's busiest ocean basins. And that is precisely what makes it dangerous to depend on. Here is the hidden rule of choke points that planners understand, and the public rarely does. The more efficient a route becomes, the more perilous it becomes to rely on it. Efficiency breeds dependency. Dependency breeds vulnerability. And the Strait of Malacca carries all three in extraordinary measure. The strait is not just narrow, it is, in places, genuinely shallow, barely adequate for the deepest modern supertankers. It is chronically congested. It operates near or at practical capacity for significant portions of the year. And its surrounding waters have historically attracted piracy, smuggling, and irregular maritime activity in ways that more open ocean routes do not. Disruption here does not require a catastrophic event, a single vessel grounding in the wrong location, a collision between two large ships, a fuel spill triggering environmental response protocols, even seasonal haze drifting from Indonesian land-clearing fires that reduces visibility to the point where navigation becomes genuinely hazardous. Any of these, none of which are extraordinary, all of which have happened, can cascade through the global economy with alarming speed. Because modern trade is not built around resilience, it is built around precision. Factories in Vietnam receive components from suppliers in Malaysia, calibrated to arrive within hours of when they are needed. Retail distribution systems in Europe and North America are timed to global shipping schedules with margins measured in days, not weeks. Energy markets react to uncertainty about supply routes before supply is even disrupted. The global economy is not fragile because it is weak. It is fragile because it has been optimized, refined to a thinness that eliminates redundancy and leaves almost no room for geographic surprise. History has already demonstrated, with uncomfortable clarity, what choke point failure looks like in practice. In March 2021, a single container ship, the Ever Given, became lodged diagonally across the Suez Canal, one of the world's other critical maritime choke points. For 6 days, one of the most important trade corridors on Earth was completely blocked. The cost to global trade ran to billions of dollars per day. Hundreds of ships queued in holding patterns. Shipping insurance rates spiked overnight. Companies scrambled to reroute cargo around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to journey times and millions to shipping costs. And that was the Suez Canal, a passage carrying significantly less traffic than Malacca. The Strait of Malacca handles roughly twice the annual vessel transits of Suez. It carries oil that powers not one region but much of industrial Asia. It carries components and finished goods that underpin manufacturing supply chains spanning a dozen countries. A serious disruption here would not produce a 6-day inconvenience. It would produce something closer to a structural shock, the kind that takes months to fully absorb and reveals just how little redundancy the global system has quietly built into itself. This is the calculation that quietly occupies planners, economists, naval strategists, and insurance actuaries. Not whether Malacca will fail, but what the consequences look like if it does, and whether any alternative exists. And that is where Thailand enters the picture. Look carefully at a topographic map of Southeast Asia, and there is a geographic detail easy to overlook at first glance, but impossible to unsee once noticed. The Malay Peninsula, that long finger of land stretching southward from mainland Asia, narrows dramatically in its northern section, where it meets southern Thailand. Two ocean systems come astonishingly close to one another. On the western side, the Andaman Sea, part of the Indian Ocean basin, connecting toward the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and beyond. On the eastern side, the Gulf of Thailand, part of the Pacific system, connecting toward the South China Sea and the world's busiest manufacturing coastlines. Between these two bodies of water, in the region known as the Kra Isthmus, lies a strip of land roughly 50 kilometers wide at its narrowest. By the standards of modern engineering, tunnels bored through alpine granite, channels carved across the Egyptian desert, this is not an impossible challenge. It is a temptation. For more than 3 centuries, rulers and merchants, colonial administrators and modern planners have all arrived at the same thought while examining the same map. What if ships did not need to travel the full length of the Malay Peninsula and through the congested narrows of Malacca? What if they could simply cross through the land? A canal here could shorten sailing distances between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific by 1,200 kilometers or more. It could reduce the pressure on Malacca substantially. It could distribute risk, ease congestion, and offer the global shipping industry what it has always prized above nearly everything else: an alternative. That possibility alone, the idea, even unrealized, has made the Kra Isthmus one of the most strategically studied pieces of land in Asia for generations. The concept of the Kra Canal has surfaced and receded throughout history, with the rhythm of a tide that never quite comes in. Each time the idea returns, the logic is structurally identical. Global trade has grown, dependency on Malacca has deepened, the value of an alternative has increased. Engineers revisit the surveys, governments commission studies, investment consortiums form and dissolve. The canal exists in detailed proposal and then does not exist. Modern versions have envisioned a deep-water passage wide enough to accommodate the largest container ships and supertankers currently afloat. Cost estimates have ranged from $25 billion to over $100 billion, depending on specifications and financing structures. Engineering assessments have consistently concluded that the project is technically achievable. the geology of the isthmus does not present insurmountable obstacles. And yet, the canal has never been built, because geography creates opportunity, but politics and economics decide reality. A canal would physically divide Thailand, separating its southern provinces from the rest of the country in ways that carry profound implications for national integrity, regional separatism, and border security. Environmental impact assessments have raised serious concerns about coastal ecosystems, freshwater resources, and the marine environments on both sides of the cut. There are genuine questions about whether shipping companies, faced with canal tolls and transit scheduling, would actually divert from Malacca in sufficient numbers to justify the investment. And beneath all of this lies a deeper truth about large infrastructure. Building it is never only an engineering problem. It is a question of whether the world, the governments, the financiers, the shipping companies, the regional powers, is prepared to reorganize around it. History suggests that reorganization on that scale requires not just ambition, but a disruption significant enough to make the old route genuinely intolerable. Recognizing the political and financial complexity of a full canal, Thailand has in recent years pursued a different concept, less dramatic in its geography, but aimed at the same strategic objective: a land bridge. Cargo would arrive by ship on the Andaman coast, be unloaded onto trains or heavy transport, cross the peninsula by land corridor, and be reloaded onto vessels on the Gulf of Thailand side. No canal, no division of the country, no need to cut through the earth, just the intelligent use of surface infrastructure to mimic the function of a passage. The proposal attracted serious interest from international logistics companies. Studies examined potential port sites. Economic modeling suggested that even a partial diversion of Indian Ocean to Pacific traffic could generate significant revenue and create substantial development in Thailand's southern provinces. Whether this specific version proceeds or not matters less than what its repeated emergence reveals. The pressure is not originating from Thailand. It is originating from the structure of the global trading system itself. When enough traffic concentrates on one route, the economic incentive to create alternatives becomes so powerful that it generates proposals almost automatically in different eras, different political contexts, different technical forms. The canal and the land bridge are not competing ideas. They are the same idea wearing different clothes. There is a dimension to this story that rarely surfaces in economic discussions, but which shapes the behavior of every major power with interests in the region. Chokepoints are not purely commercial phenomena, they are strategic instruments. Control over a narrow maritime passage, or simply the credible ability to disrupt one, translates into leverage of extraordinary value. It influences naval mobility. It affects energy security at the level of entire national economies. It creates the kind of geographic dependency that shapes diplomatic calculations long before any crisis emerges. Military planners from Washington to Beijing to New Delhi study the Strait of Malacca not as an interesting geography lesson, but as a potential pressure point in scenarios ranging from trade disputes to great power competition. A country does not need to close a choke point to exert influence over it. The mere possibility of disruption, a naval exercise in adjacent waters, an escalating territorial dispute, the suggestion of access restrictions is often sufficient to alter behavior. Insurance premiums rise, shipping companies hedge, governments recalculate dependencies, and begin looking at alternatives they had previously considered academic. This is why the Canal concept never fully disappears from strategic literature, even during periods when no one is seriously funding it. In its unrealized form, it functions as what strategists call an insurance concept, a demonstration that alternatives exist, even if they require decades and tens of billions to materialize, which itself moderates the leverage that any single actor might otherwise extract from Malacca's geography. But perhaps the deepest lesson here is not about Thailand, and not really about Malacca either. It is about the hidden architecture of how the modern world actually functions and where power truly resides within it. Most people, when they think about global power, think about resources, oil beneath the ground, agricultural land, feeding populations, manufacturing capacity, technological sophistication, military hardware. These are real. They matter enormously. But they share one characteristic. They can, over time, be replicated. Fields can be developed. Factories can be built. Technologies can be transferred and adapted. What cannot be easily replicated is geography. The shape of continents changes on geological timescales entirely irrelevant to human planning. Ocean routes remain constrained by the same coastlines and shallows that constrained them in the age of sail. Certain passages become unavoidable not because any civilization chose them, but because the Earth made them the only viable option. And the places where movement becomes unavoidable, the corridors through which the physical content of global civilization must pass, accrue a form of structural importance that no amount of politics can fully dissolve. This is why the pattern repeats through history with such consistency. Trade concentrates on efficient routes. Risk accumulates at choke points. The concentration eventually becomes uncomfortable enough that alternatives are imagined and pursued. Some get built. Others remain proposals, serving their strategic purpose as possibilities rather than realities. But the underlying dynamic never resolves. It only shifts. So could Thailand change the balance of one of the world's most consequential shipping corridors? Possibly. Given sufficient investment, political alignment, and a global trade environment disrupted enough to make alternatives economically irresistible, some version of the CRA concept may eventually become real. But the deeper story may be something quieter and more unsettling than any single infrastructure project. The modern world presents itself as vast, global, distributed, resilient, a planetary network so complex and interconnected that no single failure point could bring it down. And in many ways, that self-presentation is accurate. And yet, sometimes it depends on places astonishingly small. A strait barely 65 kilometers wide at its narrowest, a corridor through which tankers must pass in near single file, a passage that most people alive today will never see and have likely never thought about. The world economy may appear impossibly complex, but sometimes its most critical vulnerabilities can be drawn with a single line on a map, a line through which the physical substance of modern civilization quietly flows every hour of every day, without most of us ever noticing, which may be why planners never stop searching for alternatives. Not because Malacca is failing, but because it has become too important to be allowed to fail. Geography does not simply shape landscapes. It quietly shapes dependency, and the most powerful places on Earth are often not the largest, not the richest, but the ones the world cannot easily route around. At What the Earth Hid, this is what we explore, the hidden systems and invisible geographies quietly shaping how the world really works. Because sometimes, the most consequential forces on Earth are not mountains or oceans themselves, but the narrow passages that connect them.